Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is super exciting. Hopefully you will get a sense of just how exciting talking about open government is for us folks. So I'll try to contain myself a little bit because we've got a lot to go over. We want to make sure to kind of start from the beginning and then give all the information you might need to know about what it means to potentially run for office in our city or thinking about it in any way. Again, I'm Nikki McDonald. I'm the city manager here, and I'm super excited to be here to walk through this and then have it available for anybody else who certainly might be curious. So just a little overview of our agenda for today and for the presentation. We will be starting again with the City 101. We'll go over an overview of the city, our finances, the roles of our council members and mayor, and kind of a general idea of what the time commitment might look like for council members. I should check, can everybody hear me okay? Is the volume all right? I can also project louder as well. Then we will go over our city election process and then provide some information about our transparency laws. So things like conflicts of interest, and you might need to keep in mind if you're considering running, because it actually might change your decisions if you're thinking about what you could vote on and not vote on in the future. And then just some how-to. So if you're thinking about running for office, how do you pull papers? What does that look like? And then what kind of resources do we provide as a city to help candidates if you are thinking about pulling papers and running for office? And then again, opening things up for questions and answers. We do have, so you'll be hearing from me and from our city attorney and from our city clerk. And again, we have other staff here, including staff from our diversity, equity, and inclusion office. And so we're all here to help answer questions if you have any of those to go through. So first, we'll start with just some basics about San Luis Obispo specifically. We cover about 14.6 miles, and we have a compact urban form. And about half of that is open space. So either city owned or through easements. Our population is just over 49,000 people, although that's kind of based on estimates at this point. The 10-year census will catch up again and see where we're at. It does not include students living on campus. So currently that's estimated to be about 8,000 people. This puts us right about the middle of the pack in terms of cities in California and our size. We do have 5 city council members, and we'll have to go on that later. The city is very old in terms of cities in California. We were incorporated in 1856, and we are the 16th oldest city in the state. That's out of 483 cities. One new city joined the pack last year, so we're at 483. And our incorporation happened just 6 years after the first city in the state was incorporated, Sacramento. We have over 23,000 housing units, and a little over 60% of those are habitated by renters or make up renting stock. Our median household income is about $66,000. And we are really impacted by students who live off campus in our community. They actually kind of pull that income down because we think back to your Chinese students, we're making any money most likely, and instead just going into debt that we get to here. But before we dig in a little bit more about our city, we want to take a little step back and kind of orient ourselves within the overview of our government as a whole. Our federal government handles, of course, our government at a national and international level. That includes levying federal taxes, regulating commerce and trade, integration of federal courts, and maintaining the military, and a lot more. And I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with what the federal government does, and that might be, top of mind oftentimes. It's certainly top of our news feeds oftentimes. And then at our state government level, our states actually establish our local governments. But they have their own suite of responsibilities that include common things like license, vehicles, and driving, interstate commerce, elections, public health, and then of course a lot of funding that gets either passed through or generated by the state. Counties are then a subdivision of the state. They're considered a local government, but again, as a subdivision of the state, they're treated a little differently than cities do. They generally provide law enforcement, jails, election services, voter registration, our records. So your property records are all housed at the county. They do property assessments, public health, healthcare, social services, libraries in a lot of places, and certainly here, flood control, some fire protection, especially in unincorporated parts of the county, and animal control. So being a subdivision of the state, the counties often receive direct state tax revenue for those services. And I would note as well, they do receive a fair amount of revenue from the federal government. And so things happening at the federal government can impact our counties as well. Counties also act as the local government for areas that are not part of the incorporated city. I would say, coming from having grown up in Southern California, in LA County, where there are hundreds of cities, and unincorporated parts of the county there end up making these little islands. We are unique compared to that, which is we have firm boundaries around our cities and lots of typically open space between our cities, which is something that has been maintained very consciously by decision makers and the LAFCO local area commission. That's probably an even wonkier place to go, but it is by design and on purpose that our cities have boundaries the way that they are. And then, of course, our cities, which are my favorite, here from the city, they are also called municipalities, and they're usually responsible for providing services that make sense at a very local level. So that includes police, fire, zoning, and building permits. Building and maintaining our public infrastructure like streets and parks, and some utility services. So in San Luis Obispo, we provide water and sewer service to our communities. Some other cities get their water and sewer service from other places, including private corporations or districts. But here in San Luis Obispo, we're considered to be a full service city, meaning of the basic services to our community. And as I mentioned, there are 483 cities in the state. Of those 483, 362 are what are called general law cities, and 121 are charter cities. So the California state constitution dictates that cities can be organized under either the general laws of the state, or they can create a local charter adopted by the voters in the community, and it acts almost like an individual's constitution for that city. Cities that are organized under the general laws of the state have a little less autonomy than those that adopt their own charter because their powers are set forth in the government code. Cities that adopt their own charters have the ability to create procedures for handling what's called municipal affairs. And so San Luis Obispo is a charter city. Charter cities exist so they can establish their own procedures for matters that the state considers to be municipal affairs. And those are really brought forth from the charter into our municipal code. And our municipal code is basically our book of local laws that we all agree to use to regulate behavior, zoning, all types of local affairs. So our city charter and municipal code are both available on our website, easily accessible here. They line up together, so you're interested in seeing how they all fit together. Overall, there are about 3 main forms of local government that we see in our country. The first that we'll talk about is the council manager form of government. Under this form, the city council makes policy and approves the budget, but appoints the city manager, who operates kind of like a CEO for the city, to administer those policies and oversee day-to-day operations. This is the most common form of government for cities in our country, with about 55% of our cities in the country are formed in this way. It's typically what's used for mid-sized cities. Then you've got a mayor-council form of government, which is often called a strong mayor form of government. Under this form, the mayor is a full-time employee and acts as the manager or CEO of the organization. They do both policy and administration, but are subject to the same term limits of an elected official. So this means leadership changes on a pretty frequent basis as elections occur. This is the second most common form of government in our country, and at about 34% of cities, usually see it in much larger cities. So San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, those are some examples. And then sometimes you see it in very small cities that might need to have that more direct form of government there. And the last I'll mention is what we call a town meeting form of government. And I love to include, when I think of town meeting, I always think of The Simpsons, because
Gilmore Girls.
right, where you see you have a town hall and you hold a meeting and everybody participates and votes directly. I've heard of other cities and other parts of the country who still use this form of government, and their meetings typically go until about 2 or 3 in the morning, because you can imagine it's hard to get consensus from that group. But it is still a form that's practiced in our countries. So the San Luis Obispo operates under the council city manager form of local government. So this means the city council, again, is the policymaking body elected by the community to represent the residents' values and vision. And they operate kind of like a board of directors of a city. The council's job is to set direction, adopt policies and budgets, and engage with the community in decision making. On the city manager side, the city manager is appointed directly by the city council and serves, again, as the chief executive officer of the organization. So in short, the council sets the what and the why, and the city manager and staff handle the how. So how does this all look? This is sort of an organizational chart of the city as a whole. Citizens elect the city council. The council appoints the city manager and also the city attorney, as well as our advisory body positions. The city manager manages in our city an assistant city manager, as well as a deputy city manager and the Department of Police, Fire, Human Resources, and Finance. In San Luis Obispo, our assistant city manager also oversees what we call our community services group, which is a collection of departments that includes community development, parks and recreation, utilities, and public works. And then our deputy city manager oversees both our administration and our city departments provide both internal services to our organization, as well as a lot of external services to the community. And I'm sure everybody's hopefully had some contact with our staff and our departments on some level out in the community. And hopefully they're positive, and we always want to hear feedback one way or another. Talk a little bit more about some of the things that each of our departments do. Our city attorney's office makes sure that we are doing things legally, that they provide legal advice regarding compliance with state laws, federal laws, and local laws, and provides advice to our city council and to our department heads and staff. One quick point of clarification, they do not provide advice to the community at large or to individual community members, but instead make sure that the city as a whole is operating legally. Under community services, our parks and recreation programs, we also have a ranger service, so they're out in our open spaces and parks, making sure that they're clean and being managed well. They're maintaining our trails. They also have our public art program housed in that department. So if you see our utility box art, that's all done through our Parks and Rec department. Our utilities department provides water, sewer, and solid waste services. Our community development department does long-range planning, so helping to create our zoning laws, our general plan, and essentially making sure that we're carrying out development in a way that's orderly and makes sense and reflects the needs of the community. They also have our building and safety division and our code enforcement division. And then our public works department has our engineering, transportation, and mobility services division. So that includes parking, our transit system. So San Luis Obispo, we have our bus system that's run for our public works department. And we have a really robust active transportation program as well that helps make sure that we're making our streets safe for all users. And then again, that engineering division helps make sure that things are out being built in a responsible and effective way. Under public safety, our police department has patrol, traffic safety investigation, and neighborhood services in there. Our fire department provides fire and medical emergency response, fire inspections, and disaster planning. And then under administrative services, our human resources departments, finance department, administration, and IT, they all provide those internal services to our city departments to make sure that we're running effectively and correctly. In total, we have 474 full-time employees and about a $217 million budget for this year. The singular purpose of all of that work is to provide services and achieve the goals of our city and our city council that's established for a robust process. We'll talk a little bit about our financial plan because as a potential elected officials, establishing the budget is one of the biggest work efforts, and I would say one of the most important things that our council does really every year, but we do a really robust process every 2 years. So in order to accomplish our goals, we first have to identify what they are, and then put them together in puzzle pieces to allocate resources for accomplishing those things. Like any large organization, we have to set priorities and a strategy for how we will operate. But in our case, those priorities aren't set just internally. And unlike, say, a corporation, we're not doing it to make money. We're doing it to provide services to the community at large. So every 2 years, the city conducts a robust public engagement process to hear directly from residents about their concerns, ideas, and priorities. And hopefully, who's participated in that process and come to the community forum? Amazing. Love it. Hopefully, folks will come on out when we do it again in about a year, like a year and a half. So again, our council uses the input provided during that process. It includes first a survey and then a public forum where people can come, get information, voice their concerns, voice their ideas, and what they'd like to see us do. And then they establish what we call our major city goals, and those goals guide us on what we should focus on and invest in over a 2-year period. The final product of that process is our comprehensive financial plan. It's more than 400 pages long, and so I don't know if everybody who all has read that. It's probably like 2 of us, but it sets out the blueprint for how we're going to do our work over 2 years, as well as how we are going to fund that. It also outlines all of our capital improvement projects. So those are our major infrastructure projects that we are planning out. Currently, we have a 10-year capital improvement plan. So if you want to see what we're planning on doing over the course of the next 10 years, you can take a look at that document and see if there's a project you want to see us do. It might not be happening this year, but it might be happening in a few years. So if you're curious, I definitely recommend checking that out. And again, it links that document also links each of our departments' work to the goals that were established through that really robust engagement and input process. So on the screen is our current set of major city goals, and these will apply through June of 2027. This includes cultural vitality, economic resilience, sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, homelessness response, housing and neighborhood livability, which includes healthy, safe, and affordable housing priorities, infrastructure and sustainable transportation, and then open space, climate action, and resilience. And so under each of those, our plan provides steps that all of the departments are planning to take to help us achieve those goals within this next 2-year period. So as mentioned earlier, our total annual budget for this current year is about $217 million. That includes a lot of different funds. So we use, and most governments use, something called fund accounting. So I should say fund accounting, although depending on it's fun. You can think of it like managing a number of different buckets of money, and each bucket can only be used for certain things. So the general fund is really our all-purpose fund. It supports our core services like police, fire, parks, street maintenance. It tends to be, again, that kind of biggest bucket that we are able to do all of the things that the community needs and relies on us for. Most of the money in our general fund comes from tax revenue. And so again, at the end of the day, and I always think this is super important, it's something I talk a lot about with our teams, is our money comes from us and from the people. So it's incredibly important that we are very careful and conscientious with the way that we spend that money, and also with the way we ask for it. Because at the end of the day, it's up to the people to decide whether to increase that funding or not. We also have our enterprise funds, and that's really a way of saying that this fund and this service that it provides is going to be self-sufficient unto itself. We count for it separately. Sometimes we're required by law to do that, and that's for things that are property-related services like water and sewer service. But we also have chosen to do that with other services that we provide, like parking and then transit. And so under those buckets, they are maintained separately. And you'll see them identified: water, sewer, transit, parking. Those are all what we call enterprise funds. So that means that the rates and charges that we establish to do those things go right back into that fund and can only be used for those purposes. So water and wastewater, as an example, we set our rates based on what we need to provide that service, and we can't charge more than that. Yeah. So you'll see all of that funding get reinvested in the system itself. So stepping back again to what the city council does in all of this process. The council is the legislative and policy-making body for San Luis Obispo. And that means that, again, the council sets direction and priorities for the community and gives direction to staff on what we are supposed to be focusing on and how we deliver services. The council adopts ordinances and resolutions, as well as the city budget, which altogether establish the legal and financial framework for how the city operates. Ordinances act as our local laws, whereas resolutions tend to set policy. And so ordinances go through a more rigorous process before they become law, because they are essentially cemented until they get changed, if they do get changed in the future. Council also provides policy direction to the city manager and to staff, but it doesn't get involved in the day-to-day operations. That's instead up to the city manager to make sure all that's happening smoothly. Council does act collectively, so no one city council member can direct staff or make policy or take independent action. Decisions must be made by the council as a whole during a public meeting. And so those two things are super important. As a whole means you need at least 3 votes to do anything. And at a public meeting means that direction has to come at a notice public meeting that's open to all, subject to the Brown Act, typically held across the street in our city council chamber. The council also, again, appoints and evaluates 3 key positions, which is okay. The city manager and the city attorney, and our charter officer who serve directly under the council. So those are the 2 that we're talking about. Council members represent the community's interests and are responsible for maintaining transparency and public access to the Brown Act. And finally, council members may also serve on regional boards, advisory bodies, subcommittees where they represent the city's interests beyond our own city boundaries. And I think I heard earlier Eric Greening mentioned something about Sloan Cog. That's an example of a regional body that the city has a council member sitting on to provide direction and make decisions, really voicing the city's interest in those large regional issues. So what's the difference between the mayor and the other city council members? So in our city, we don't have what is called a strong mayor system. We have that council as a form of government. But the mayor presides over all of our city council meetings and ensures orderly conduct. So that person has to be able to manage a meeting well. They don't have veto power, and their votes count the same as the other city council members. They also represent the city for ceremonial purposes, and they sign our ordinances, resolutions, contracts, and other official city documents. They also communicate the will of the council majority to the city manager on policy matters. So that's important. While the city, while the mayor is elected directly and separately, they are one vote in terms of the policy direction of the council as a whole. But you don't have to memorize all of this if you're considering running for office or to get elected. We do have a set of comprehensive council policies and procedures that are held annual, and it covers everything you might need to know, from how meetings are conducted to how oaths are administered. It's available on our website for anyone to review. And you can see that picture there. It is updated on a regular basis, and so it is intended to reflect, again, best practices and really the will of the council as a whole in terms of the way we want to conduct our business together. And so we update it on a regular basis to make sure it reflects what everybody wants and needs. In terms of some logistics, so being a city council member in San Luis Obispo isn't considered to be a full-time job, but it does require real-time commitment. There's a lot of preparation, reading, and engagement involved with serving in that capacity in our city. There are definitely busy seasons of the year. Anytime we're doing a budget, I would say, definitely very busy, and at goal setting time. And then there's some other times that might be a little bit lighter in terms of what's required of somebody for that particular month. Our council meetings are generally held on the first and third Tuesday of each month. They regularly start at 5:30 p.m. for the public. I will mention that before each regular meeting, the council often meets in closed session. Closed sessions are held for matters that are confidential and are limited to topics that are allowed to be held in closed session under the record. They include things like real estate negotiations, litigation, and labor negotiations. Council meeting packets are prepared by our city clerk's office, and they're distributed 7 days in advance of the meeting, typically. Everything is provided electronically. We don't, as a general rule, print our packets out, but they are available online. And then in terms of compensation, our council pay and benefits are reviewed every 2 years by a citizen committee. We're actually in that time frame right now. We have a committee. I'm a member of that committee sitting right here right now, which is really helpful to get guidance and input from a spectrum of people if we need to make some adjustments to compensation. And it looks at comparing how our cities pay for our elected officials and appointed officials to other similar cities, and then they make recommendations to council. Currently, the mayor earns a little less than $3,000 a month. Council members earning about $2,300. We also have a number of committees and committee opportunities. Our council members themselves serve on a wide variety of committees throughout the region, and they also provide oversight to our own 17 advisory bodies. Each year, the council reviews the list of subcommittee assignments and provides feedback for the next year and might shift some of those assignments. The mayor and vice mayor ultimately make the assignments, and each council member serves on at least 7, and the mayor is on 12. So that helps give you an idea of time. There is a lot of work involved, and I will say it is a privilege to serve on a council who is incredibly hardworking, very hardworking. We hold a lot of meetings, we get a lot of business done, and our packets are hefty, hundreds of pages oftentimes, and everyone reads them all. And so having that level of dedication to sit down with your packet and sink in and ask questions and make sure things are clear and that you're clear on what's being asked of you, that's like the meat and potatoes of the position, and it's incredibly important. And people notice, I will have to say. The public notices, and certainly staff notice that the council is very well informed and that they read everything. And with that,
still some red there.
to hand things over to our city attorney.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Latino Outreach Council for creating the forum for us here. It's there. I am Christine Dietrich. I am the city attorney. have been since 2010, been with the city almost 21 years now. So obviously, I think it's a great place to lead and have had the privilege of working for an amazing series of council members, including Councilmember Marks and Andy here. Councilmember Marks was actually on the council that hired me and is back on the council now, so things always come full circle. It really is an amazing privilege to serve all this community, and it's really great to see people coming out and have interest in doing that at the council level. It's a really important service role for our community and great things that it is. So I want to talk a little bit about voting in San Luis Obispo. Before I do that, I would like to invite our county partners to stand and identify themselves and maybe a little bit about the work that they're doing, because they are very much our partners in everything that happens in voting in San Luis Obispo, because we run a consolidated election. So Elena, yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Elaine Gano. I'm your county clerk reporter and registrar of voters. And just like Christine has said, I think we've known each other for 21 years now and started the city as well. So we work very closely together with all of our jurisdictions, each of the cities, school districts, special districts, and of course state law. The cities are, and I'm sure you're going to get into this, but responsible really for conducting their own elections if they so wish to. Their city clerk is their elected elections official. We do consolidate with everybody most of the time, but they want us to go ahead and conduct their elections. So that's normally when you're about to is because everybody is jumping on board and conduct their elections. So I always enjoy most of the time, actually. You know, that everybody does things a little bit differently. Election law is pretty crazy, and for charter cities, San Luis being one of the only ones here in our county that's a charter city. They have different set of rules that they may be able to go off of, as opposed to all the other ones, and then you have the school districts, different codes that we all have to interpret to make sure that we're paying. So, big, huge undertaking, but I do enjoy what I do, and thank you guys for this is Erin Clausen. She is she's my voice if you see anything online, social media, websites. She is wholeheartedly responsible for helping us get the outreach out. And so I asked her to join me here today because I know that this is so important to kick off to voting in San Luis Obispo. And so we're just here to listen and answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So voting in San Luis Obispo, the mayor, we have a mayor who's elected to 2-year terms, and council members, the 4 council members are elected to 4-year terms. And we do have term limits in San Luis Obispo. So it's 8 years, and so that's 4 mayor terms or 2 council terms. And historically, we've had folks that jumped back and forth. So because they are separately elected offices, you can go back and forth, and there have been folks who have served for significantly longer than 8 years at a stretch on our council, but just different roles of mayor. So every 2 years, there's 1 mayor. We also have staggered elections. So every 2 years, you've got the mayor and 2 council members up for election. And then prior to 2026, including 2024, each resident would vote for their top candidate for mayor. So there could be any number of mayoral candidates that you vote for one. And then their top 2 candidates for council member, and the top 2 vote getters would win those 2 available seats that are available every 2 years. Starting in 2026, we're going to have a switch in how we conduct those elections, and I'll give you a little bit of history on the why behind that shortly. But starting in 2026, each resident will vote for their top candidate for mayor, so nothing changes in the way that the mayor position is elected. And their top one candidate for council member. So that's going to be a switch. And that's why we want to really get out ahead of this well in advance and make sure that we've got folks in the community that are understanding that change and the why behind it, that we're identifying what the community's questions are and are offering you resources to dig deeper and find out more about that, including our county partners. Again, the same result. The top two vote getters will win those available 2 seats, but again, it will be every voter voting just for one candidate. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
I had a quick question about term. Is it just a matter of someone taking a break at something? So let's say, unlike Councilmember Marcus, to my left here, let's say someone is a 2-term council member, they take a 2-year break and they run in the elections. Like that's all that has to be.
That's
you don't have to like flip between being mayor, council member, right?
no, you can go off the council and come back on. You could run for the mayor position and then go back to council. Yeah, there's a number of mechanisms by which someone might actually have a tenure on the council for more than the 8-year term limit.
Yeah, you can also go longer than 2 years. So
Yes.
I served IMEA, one case IMEA 2002, and then 6-year IMEAs, and then 2008. And then halfway through my 4-year term, I decided to be mayor. Yeah. And you can do that too. And so I want to, so, was defeated in 2016, and then took 4-year IMEAs. And I'll be turned out to be. But I'm not gonna.
All right, so you heard it first here. Okay, so why is the city making this switch is a perfectly valid question. And so back in 2022, the city, like dozens and dozens of other jurisdictions throughout California, received a legal demand, so it's legal challenge, I would say legal demand, under the California Voting Rights Act. And so it's called a demand letter, and it alleged that the city's at-large system, that is the system where everybody in the community votes for candidates versus districts where you only vote for candidates that live in the geographic area where you live, diluted the voting power of protected classes, particularly the Latin community here in SLO. And the demand was that the appropriate remedy for that would be to establish district elections. And there's been a great deal of litigation throughout the state of California. The city of Santa Monica remains in litigation with the person who served, the second person actually. We had 2 district demand letters. One we resolved fairly quickly without a change. The second was served by the Southwest Voter Education Project and Registration and Education Project, and represented by a very skilled elections practitioner, civil rights, voting rights advocate, Kevin Shane. And we engaged in a really long period of negotiation, really driven by a very deep dive on our demographics and our data and whether or not districts would represent a positive move forward. This council and prior councils have had a very strong commitment to investment in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and certainly we're open to and focused on solutions that would advance that in the voting rights context. So there wasn't a sort of knee-jerk reaction against it, but there was a very analytical, data-based approach towards evaluating what might advance what we identified as our collective objectives with SB Rep and our legal counsel. So what that analysis showed was that the largest minority group living in San Luis Obispo, is the Latino community, and it's not concentrated to a specific geographic area. And the conclusions that we were reaching, the concerns that we were having, is that dividing the city into districts was actually had the potential to diminish a real momentum that has been building in our community around coalition building and advancing a broader diversity of candidates to represent our community and bringing more diverse voices to the table. And so that was a real concern for the city council that was evaluating that demand. And those were a set of concerns that we really engaged with SB Rep and the legal counsel on. And so, you know, what we don't want to do is implement a solution that exacerbates the problem. So after just short of 2 years, over a year and a half, I think, right, Andy, of negotiation, the council ultimately approved a settlement agreement in November 2024 with SB Rep. And the solution was, instead of going to a district election, we would implement what we have called citywide single vote, which is the vote for one to elect two system that I talked about on the prior slide. And this accomplished a couple of things from our perspective. A, the city of Santa Monica has spent, I believe, over $20 million at this point in their own attorney's fees. And as of right now has been ordered to pay the attorney's fees, which are equally significant on the other side. Because that case went up to the Supreme Court and Santa Monica ultimately lost that case. Making very similar like demographic arguments that probably we would have made, although their community composition is quite different. And I think that this council and this community's commitment to equity historically is sets a pretty good record. But you know, we also felt like there are ways to move forward and advance shared voter equity goals and ensure that while we don't think that our current system is resulting in vote dilution, there's a really complex analytical process that goes into determining that. Our sample size is so small that it yields some pretty wacky results, and it's very hard to derive any clear answers from that data set. But what we know for sure is that we as a community are committed to advancing voter equity and candidate diversity. And so we think that this has a real opportunity to do that, regardless of whether or not there is an existing vote dilution problem. So we accomplished that through a couple of things. We entered into a settlement agreement with SB Rep, their legal counsel. And we, as part of that settlement agreement, we agreed, because we wanted some court oversight and direction, because this is a little bit, as Elena mentioned, as Vicky mentioned, we are a charter city, and this is a novel approach to solving this problem. And so we wanted court involvement and oversight to ensure that we were complying with the California Voting Rights Act, and that the remedy that we were instituting was going to be acceptable and, you know, have the likelihood of being effective. We consulted with Professor Latner over at Cal Poly, who's done a great deal of research into voter equity issues, and he's very, very helpful in helping the council and my office negotiating this, inform the decision making. Teresa and I met with him a few times and got some very helpful feedback. So what the advantages that we identified over district elections is that there aren't any geographic barriers to selecting a candidate of choice citywide, and so that advances the potential for coalition voting. So every voter gets to choose among all candidates running for council versus being limited to choosing only among those candidates who live in the voter's particular district or geographic area. What we learned, Teresa did some crunching of numbers historically in our elections. There's a metric called undervotes that you will see reported in election results often. And what that means is people voted for fewer seats than they have the ability to vote for. And so in our system, we were showing that there is a significant amount of a significant percentage of our community that seemed to already be implementing this methodology sort of on their own or through sort of community coalition building, where they had the right to vote for 2 seats. They were nonetheless undervoting and only voting for 1. And what that can do is concentrate the voting power of a bloc that might not on their own be able to elect their preferred candidate, but with some community engagement and some partnership with other folks in your community, you can choose to try to essentially elevate one candidate and not divide those votes among 2. And so that prevents a majority from always controlling both seats to the detriment of the ability of a minority group in the community being able to elect their preferred candidate, or at least one of their preferred candidates. And then every voter gets to vote in every election. So one of the concerns that we had about district elections is if you are in a district, you only vote every 4 years because those council seats only come up for election every 4 years. So effectively, that means you're skipping a 2-year election cycle that historically you would have been able to vote in. And under the single vote system, you will continue to get to vote every 2 years. So that is one of the benefits that we've identified with this new system. So what to expect next? This is kind of our kickoff meeting. And again, I know this is a lot to take in, but thank you for being here with us and, hopefully being ambassadors in the community to help us identify what the information needs are and what questions and answers would be helpful to provide to the community, who we need to be talking to, where we need to be doing outreach. We're starting, a year in advance because we want to have, our community has a high expectation of engagement and communication, and we want to meet that expectation, and we want to make sure that people understand the importance of participating in their democracy and how to do that and what we're doing here and why. We're not trying to hide anything. We really want to invite people in and understand where our blind spots are, because we've been pretty in the weeds on this for a while. And so this is our opportunity collectively to, look up and engage together and identify what we need to do to make sure people are understanding. Yeah.
Thank you for trying. I know that there's going to be a big push that's starting to go out of the district office. So it's important to understand what the changes and how it affects them. And the representatives. The previous slide, I was a little confused on what you mean by everyone is voting every 2 years. Every voter gets to vote in every election for both a mayor and council seat versus voting for a council seat only in every other. I don't understand how that. Oh,
so because mayor's every 2 years, right? Yeah. So everybody would vote for mayor. That wouldn't be typically for a community our size. If you districted, you would do 4 districts and an at-large mayor. So everyone would vote every 2 years for the mayor, but if we were in districts, you would only vote every 4 years for those candidates that were in your district. So you couldn't vote for all of the candidates on the ballot. You could only vote for those that were in your geographic area, and you would only do that every other city election.
Like we do for the county seats, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Terms are staggered.
Correct.
So that there's certain there's a continuous kind of context that's established. You don't have all 4 council meetings to do all.
Right. Yes.
That makes perfect sense. I missed the in a district election model. I thought that was like a metaphor for this, somehow this old system.
Yeah, no, that's contrasting the transition we're actually making to the alternative that was demanded of us initially.
I had a very quick question. I don't know like state level election law enough to go answer this. I wonder if it's
thankfully we've got some experts.
Yeah,
on
and
this.
it's, codes happen, this famously happens in New York City. What is an alternative they could have considered, something like ranked choice voting?
So there are a couple of jurisdictions that have done ranked choice voting. The analysis on ranked choice voting is showing there is a great deal of voter confusion that is happening around ranked choice voting. So yes, as a charter city, that is something that theoretically we could have considered. A couple of problems. And we did explore that as an alternative. That was absolutely part of the discussion, the settlement discussion that we had, and alternatives that the council asked for information on that we provided to them. Ultimately, there were barriers to utilizing the equipment that our county ROV has available to them. There is Secretary of State approval probably necessary. There is a growing body of data suggesting that voter confusion is a problem, and ultimately we would have had to administer our own election within the city rather than consolidating our election with the county in order to accomplish that, which is very expensive. And also, again, can be confusing to voters. And our goal here is to make participating as clear and simple as it can be, so that the greatest number of people feel welcomed into our democracy and participating in it. So those were considerations that were very much at the forefront of the council's decision process.
Thank you for that extra clarity. I was in no way advocating for it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thank you for raising it. Yes, sir.
Yes, it seems to me that the objective is to see more minority representation in city council. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's one of the objectives, or at least to create the opportunity for that to happen where there is a defined minority population that is unlikely on their own to be able to elect a preferred candidate in an at-large system. So there's a lot of data suggesting that vote dilution is very common in at-large systems. So this is a mechanism by which to elevate that opportunity.
It seems to me that you can change all of these systems that you're talking about, and you still have zero minority representation in the city council, unless you have candidates that are actually they have the know-how to actually win those elections. Otherwise, you go around and around, you never have a minority elected to one of the positions. Now, to me, I didn't hear any plan to actually prepare kids, whether they are 20-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, to actually prepare them for someday will come, so that they can be actually in a position to represent their community, their city, in those positions, and contribute to actually make decisions at city council level, at the county level, or state level. So I think to me that is lacking, at least I didn't hear. And but perhaps this is for another conversation.
I think that is a phenomenal point. I agree entirely. I coach a mock trial team, and I believe children are the future, and that civic engagement at that level is so deeply important to developing people who feel vested in their communities and motivated and qualified to serve. That's probably more granular than we're getting here today, but it's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for as we approach this communication and outreach process. So thank you very much for that. And we definitely will take note of that. We do try to get out into schools and get people excited about serving the city governments and educated about what their local governments do. I mean, I personally am going to do more of that. So. So kind of what to expect on the communication front. Lots of outreach and communication. There's some examples of the things that we have in mind over here. We can definitely add to the list. also get out into the schools and into the youth communities and talk to kids. We're also talking to parents, right? We're developing the next generation while having kids go home and talk to their parents about this kind of leadership and civic engagement. And I think that's a really important. So we definitely this. Early outreach to promote voter registration and turnout. It's again, you know, you can offer opportunities, but unless people actually go to the ballot box and come and register to be candidates and participate in this process, to your point, we're not really accomplishing much except the process change, and we're not changing process for the sake of changing process. We're changing process for the sake of opening participation. Education on the new ballot process. So Elena and Teresa and Elena's staff and our staff and I will be working very, very closely. The next step on that will be in January. We will be actually bringing forward an ordinance to be adopted by the City Council that will outline this new ballot process. As Elena noted, we are a charter city, and so we have some freedom to deviate from certain provisions of the elections code, and we will do that through an ordinance. Our charter allows us to vary that slightly. That's why we're able to implement this new system through an ordinance adoption. That ordinance will become effective immediately. That's January 13th that is scheduled. If you want to put a save the date on your calendars to join us and give us some feedback on that process, we'll be very grateful. So that will be the next step. We may need to amend the stipulated judgment that we entered into with SP Rep to make sure that it is specifically referencing that ordinance, that implementation of this new process. We want to make sure that we are crystal clear on that every step of the way, and also involve our partners at the county or registrar of voters, so that we have very clear court direction for them to assist us in implementing the new process. So that's, I think, going to be helpful, but those are next steps, obviously, that will be done publicly at public meetings, in court, if necessary to amend that stipulated judgment. Should be a pretty streamlined process, but we're starting that very early, so that people are aware that they have time to digest. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of kind of complex, interrelated governmental processes. And so we know that that can be overwhelming, and we want to make sure that people have time to digest it and come along and develop questions, and that we're available in a time frame that's relevant to answer those questions. And then council candidates play a really important role in educating constituents. So again, we want to get this information out and these processes in place well in advance of the time when any of you who are interested in running for office might be pulling papers, so that when you're out campaigning, you can be ambassadors of education and information and help the folks that you're running to represent understand these processes and make sure that it works, that everybody who's entitled to this in the processes. Should you become a council member elect, and I do mean elect because the Brown Act kicks in before you are actually a council member, you will be subject to the Brown Act, and that is the Brown Act is what's kind of commonly referred to as the Sunshine Law. So it's a transparency law in California. It ensures that city business is conducted openly and transparently in public. It is known as the public's business, is applied to the Brown Act. And that really is key to what we do. This is, Whitney gave you some analogies to private corporations. This is where it differs. We don't do things in closed boardrooms. We don't do things without public engagement. We don't make decisions that serve only a bottom line and not a community. Those are values that are prioritized above, economy and efficiency. It's engagement, it's inclusion, it's outreach, it's transparency, it's participation in the process, and so that takes a little longer. But this is one of the primary laws that governs how we go about doing that. It applies to all city council meetings and advisory bodies. So again, but for the, the closed session items, which is, we could do an hour on that and we won't today, but this business has to occur in public. It's a little bit of a counterintuitive human communication structure because you can't talk to your colleagues ahead of time about what you're going to do when you go to that meeting. So you can feel a little bit isolated. And a meeting is considered anywhere where a majority of the council members discuss city business electronically or in person. So it's not, you don't get to just be like, well, I can't go to the coffee shop, but I'll just text them or email them or, signal chat them or whatever the case may be. And then also agendas, you have to tell the public in advance what you're planning on doing as a city council so that they can decide whether they want to allocate their valuable time to coming and speaking directly to you as council members about those matters of business. And so you have to do that in a way that clearly communicates to the public in a way that is reasonably understandable to people what it is we're going to be doing, and gives them an opportunity to show up at that meeting or send an email or schedule a meeting with their council member or a coffee or submit a letter or whatever the case may be to communicate where they stand on that issue. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that from the council perspective. Again, particularly if you're coming from the private sector, I'll say I think this is probably one of the hardest things to get accustomed to, but it is such an integral part of the public process and of public service. Oh, and things that, things that are not on that agenda, let's talk about. So people will show up and say, I want you to do this now. And the answer usually is no, unless it is a real emergency situation that is going to result in public health and safety harm. If you don't act on it presently, you're generally going to have to say, thank you for that input, and we will talk to staff about getting that on a future agenda so that we can discuss it legally and transparently in a way that invites other members to the table. No serial meetings. So serial meetings are sort of that daisy chain where, so council member A talks to council member B, which is fine. That's less than a majority of the bodies if two of them can discuss. And then council member A goes to council member C and says, hey, you know what I was talking to B about that we should catch up on? That's illegal. That's a serial meeting where somebody's conveying sort of daisy chain style information that constitutes a majority of the council members weighing in outside of the public meeting. Again, public must be allowed to attend and comment. So every item on a council agenda, the public in attendance has the right to stand up and have their, in our system, 3 minutes to discuss that thing with the council and to direct their comments directly to the council. They don't have to tell you who they are. They don't have to tell you where they live. They don't have to tell you what their agenda is or their intent in these comments or who they're connected to. They have the right to be there without conditions, and they have the right to speak to you on those matters that are within your jurisdiction. And then again, closed sessions allowed only for very limited purposes, and Whitney mentioned the most common. Litigation, real property, labor negotiations, personnel, and kind of for intuitive reasons, right? There are, and always when you're approaching transparency issues as a council member, you want to be thinking about how is the public's interest best served. And there's been a policy, state law level judgment that the public's interest in some of these things are best served by not broadcasting the city's negotiating position ahead of time because it puts them at a disadvantage to protect the public resources. If one side has to broadcast their position and they don't have the ability to kind of negotiate the best deal for the public. So that's kind of the reasoning behind those exceptions to the Brown Act and just kind of the framework in which I would invite you to think about it. And then violations can result in legal and reputational consequences, including criminal prosecution. So it is a violation of law to violate the Brown Act, to talk about things in private that you should be talking about in public, to disclose in public those things under the closed session that are required to be kept private for the public's benefit. So those are all things that should you be elected or should you run and you want to talk more about, well, I could spend a day with you talking about these things. I love it. I love transparency laws. The other big one is the Public Records Act, and this is also really counterintuitive for people who have not kind of grown up in the public sector. It was a shocker to me when I came from the private sector into the public sector. It feels very invasive in a lot of ways, but essentially your business, anytime you're talking about city business as a representative of the city, you should assume that that's also the public's business. So you've got an accountability buddy right here next to you reading over your shoulder, and every time you go to hit send, think about whether or not you want to see that thing on the front page of the Tribune or the New Times or Calcoast News or whatever, wherever it is you get your news, because that is a distinct possibility. And that, again, is to ensure that we are being transparent with the public, that we are responsibly stewarding the resources of the public and the commitments that we made. So it's important. It applies to all formats: paper, email, text, again, signal chats, photos, digital files, any kind of social media, direct messaging platforms. You don't get to just take it to a different format and alleviate yourself of the obligations. If you're talking about the public's business, it's the public's business no matter what format you're doing that in. And then it also doesn't matter where you store those records. So records of public business must be retained. We have a records retention schedule that is adopted by the City Council and required by law. And so you don't get to just delete permanently records of communications of public business. And there's a lot of nuance in this that we'll go into if you are elected or if anybody just wants to chat about it. But you have to retain those things, and even if you retain them on your personal device, they're still public records and they're still subject to you gathering and producing those regardless of where they are stored or kept. My strong advice, if you're going to do this, is keep your private out of our public and our public out of your private. Like the Reese's peanut butter cup ads, like those two things are not delicious together and they should be avoided. So if you can maintain really bright line boundaries between your private social media, your private email accounts, your private phone, and the devices and networks and files in which you conduct your city business, because what you don't want is a court down the road saying, give me your device and you're going to search it because somehow you feel like you haven't done that adequately yourself or you don't forthright produce records that are public records. And frankly, we see that on the front pages a lot related to passerolls right here close to home, and we don't want to do that. So let's not do that. And then staff are the ones that respond to formal Public Records Act requests. So they will generally come in through the clerk's office. The clerk's office on the vast majority of records requests is going to be working with my office. That is because the potentially responsive documents need to be reviewed for attorney-client privilege, work product protection, and other confidentiality concerns. Not everything will have to be disclosed, but we do have to review everything that is potentially responsive. So that takes a lot of time and a lot of, frankly, expertise in the nuances of these laws. So, that's not one that if you're elected, I would ever recommend that you try to navigate on your own. That's why you have staff and legal advisors and support to help you navigate through that. And so far this year, we are on record pace. We have had 402 Public Records Act requests that we have responded to. So that represents tens of thousands of pages of production, because some of them are incredibly broad and probably, within there, I would say hundreds of thousands of documents reviewed for responsiveness and production. And with that, I will introduce your amazing city clerk and city election official.
That's one of my favorite parts of my job. And so with this, I'm gonna go pretty quick, because if you do actually run for council, we will be going through this deep dive of depth. And there's a lot of information, but this is just okay. So if you're thinking about running, of course, we've gone through our term limits and for the mayor and council, but your eligibility, you must be over 18. You must be a registered voter in the city of San Francisco, and you must be a resident of the city of San Francisco through your entire term. Some really important information to review is our elections code. It's pretty depth to read, but you should at least skim it. Also, the Fair Political Practice Commission, they have a website. It's called a really great handbook. It talks about conflict of interest, the Brown Act, and of course your campaign statements and what you need to do to decide. And then the city has their own elections regulations, which are and so a lot of documents to read, right in depth. If you have questions, we can answer regarding that. So now that you've decided, one of the first documents that you will have to fill out is called a Form 501. You can get a copy on our website. You can get a copy from the Fair Political Practice Commission. What this says and what it does is it tells everyone that you intend your attention to run the council. It's filed a copy with you and a copy. We send a copy with the state Secretary of State. And then after that, that's when you can start collecting contributions, spending your own money. It's a really important part for you to declare that you can run the rights. You can do that at any time. You can do it tomorrow. You can wait until the nomination period starts. The nomination period starts. That's the official portion of the election. On July 13th, it runs for a month. At that time, you will come to my office, make an appointment, to get all of the paperwork that you need to file actually become a candidate. I highly recommend you make an appointment. I highly recommend that you bring someone with you, because as I said before, it's a lot of information for some people. It's the first time you're hearing it, so it's always good to have some ears so that you understand. So the nomination period ends on August 7th. That means all of your paperwork has to be in, complete, and verified by that date. However, if one of our incumbents, of which this year you have decides not to run, they have up to that day to decide. And if they decide not to, we extend for 1 week, which means the final day would be August 12th. Here we go. We had that happen. Councilmember Gomez didn't decide until really close to the nomination period that he was not going to run again. And so I had a very busy Monday where I believe I had at least 5 people come in, but which is fine. You can do that, but you only have 1 week to get all of the paperwork done and fill out. When I say all of your paperwork, you have nomination signatures. The nomination to be nominated in the city of San Francisco, you must have 20 signatures. Our nomination papers have signature lines for 30 people. We highly recommend that that's the least, because we have to have all of those signatures verified. So anyone who signs your nomination papers must also be registered to vote in the city of San Luis Obispo at the address that they provide when they fill out the form. And so that's why sometimes it's a little confusing for other people because they think they've changed their registration and they haven't. And so that can cause that signature to keep them valid. You'll also have paperwork for your ballot designation, and what the ballot designation is a group of words that go on the ballot next to your name, that is your principal, profession, location, or occupation. There are very, very strict guidelines which we will go over as to what that can mean. Even using the word retired has to be done in a certain way. So again, we'll go through the whole task. There's a worksheet that you have to justify why you're using what you're using. And then the other thing, which is also always a little bit of a sticking point, the clerk's office and the state have very, very, very specifics on what can be in your candidacy. It can only be 200 words, and the whole things, the underlining, all the same font, block style. It's, like I said, very, very specific. So we will go through that. We will have to send it in early to us so we can verify that it's correct, so that there are no hiccups going forward. Make sure I got that one right. We've had issues with that in the past. So, and there's also the option to have that candidate statement in English and in Spanish, one or the other, or both. In this county, for us, you do not have to have it in Spanish. It's allowed. This one we have at least the percentage. Last year it was 307, 300 for English only, and 700 for both. We'll probably go up a little, I'm sure, but because that's the way everything is. But that's just a general template. Okay, and then another part of this is all of your campaign finance. So, as I indicated before, everybody files a 501, and then you have a decision. If you decide you want to use more than $2,000 of your own money, or collect contributions from others over $2,000, then you need to file another document. It's called a 401. It's basically setting up your campaign account and providing that information to the Secretary of State. That does require you to file a $50 check with the Secretary of State so that they can set up all of that and give you a number for your campaign account. If you do decide to go over the $2,000 limit and have an account for that, there are going to be annual filings required from you during the election every 30 days. And then if you have to open your account, file the 501, which also if you want to have a secretary, treasurer, that will be indicated on this form. I personally would recommend you have a treasurer because it's a lot to run your own own campaign and handle all that money and worry about the checks getting in and the reporting and all the money you're spending, because all of this must be tracked because it all becomes a public record. Anything you file with my office regarding your campaign is a public record, meaning anyone can ask. Another form that you're going to have to fill out is the statement of economic interest, and that's in Form 700. All candidates must file, all elected officials must file. What this basically says is where you have an economic interest in the city, so property, investments, businesses, because now that you become a public official and could be making decisions with regard to something near your property, that we have to disclose that information to the public. It's not readily available, I mean, it is online, you can search it, but I'm not having people come and ask them for this, or that, but like I said, it is online. We do redact a lot of the, some of the information, but for the most part, it is available to the public. And if someone comes to my office, I have to provide it to them under that. So if you're elected, as Christine said, the Brown Act kicks in almost automatically, I mean, as soon as that election happens. But more importantly, there's a lot that happens right after it. So we swear you in as soon as we can after the clerk recorder's office has certified the election. They have until 30 days after the elections go around. Next year will be December 3rd to certify it. And we usually get the swearing-in schedule that's it. So open to the public, like I would write your friends, family, whatever. We do have a reception afterwards, but after that, and since the last two elections, we had council meetings the very next day or within 2 or 3, days of that because of how things fall. And we only usually have one council meeting in December, so that's why we're trying to finish up all these work weeks. But we don't just show you the ones to bury you in paper. We also provide training. You'll meet with each department head for about 2 to 3 hours, so that, and department heads 2 to 3 hours to look at these 30 hours of training there. We'll meet with the city manager on a regular basis. You give a weekly in the beginning, and then we can how comfortable you are, if you get up to speed, if you go to, every other week. It's a really upswing because right after the new year, usually starting 2 weeks in, we start our financial planning process, which is really intense because you're having to get up to speed on huge budget and get everything in the forum, and then goal setting, and then adopting budget, all of that comes right in. One good thing is we're moving our advisory body recruitments to a little bit later so that you're not having to deal with that cost. So, and also there's a conference put on by the League of California Cities that we send you to by the January so that you can meet with other new council members and hear different things about how other cities run, how meetings are run. There's an ethics training at that time. How to be a board member and all the topics there's tons of stuff to get you ready to serve. You do your training with me, also where we talk to you about the Brown Act again, talk to you about the Records Act again, let you know about your professional development account and your new council member account so that you can set up your office, make sure that you're prepared with equipment, you get a laptop, cell phone, all those things. We do that for 2 reasons. The most important one is that we want to keep your business and your private business and your city business separate. So we ask that you always use your city laptop and your city phone for any private. Also makes it easy if we have to help you do that searches or I am going to turn this over to you.
All right. It's a lot of dense material, but Teresa's incredible resource. I just have 2 more slides. I think you can get out of here before it's too late. But just a couple quick things. The city is trying to do a much better job in collaboration with our office members and inclusion to make the materials accessible. So we already have most of our key materials, such as announcements, flyers, and stuff already translated to Spanish. But if you ever
need any other materials translated, feel free to contact the city. We also have department staff or department people. And then interpretation services that can also be arranged for city meetings or events. Like today, we have that offering. We do have some people as advance to organize it. But just contact the city clerk's office if you need those. And then as far as staying involved, we encourage you to sign up for our e-notifications if you haven't already. And social media, if you do that, that's how we get out most of our information, is through those news channels. And then if you decide after today that running for council is too much, we also have a bunch of advisory bodies, which I think Christine and Whitney both touched on. But we do have a vacancy right now, I know for sure, at least in our resources section. That's giving me a thumbs up. And maybe some others. So if you're interested in possibly joining an advisory body, not council, feel free to contact us. Yeah, so that is pretty much all that I have. I also wanted to put a plug for our community academy. I know Dave is here, participated in our community academy 2 years ago. It's something that we do every 2 years. It's a 6-week course. It's every Monday night for 6 weeks from 5 to 8 p.m. So it's kind of a time commitment, but you get dinner every night, and you get to, it's super, super fun.
Get
like,
climb on top of fire engine.
Yeah, we do field trips, deep dive into all the departments, and our department heads will come speak. We have a bunch of different leadership teams, guest speakers, council members. So if you are interested in that, feel free. I actually have a sign up sheet, or you can just ping me and let me know, and I can get you on a list so I can email that information when it comes out. We'll probably be sending out the application opening in late January, early February, and then usually around April is when the community starts. But it does fill up. It's 30 seats, and it usually does fill up. So if you're interested, I recommend, as soon as that information comes out, mark it on your calendar and then just apply as soon as it opens up. But with that, we have our staff still here. Honey's still here, and Jan Marks. If any of you don't know Jan, she's a current council member. So if you're looking for feedback from the real side of it, we recommend reaching out to either current council members or previous council members. Amy Keys was here, she's a great resource. And yeah, that's it. But thank you so much for coming.